Wow, so more stuff is coming out about the Nintendo Switch 2. There's been some mixed opinions on what's coming out right now, and I'm sure there's going to be more information coming out for this system as we get closer to it. I mean, really, these next few days are going to be pretty key for the Nintendo Switch 2, as the Nintendo Switch 2 experience is going on right now that I unfortunately did not get a ticket for. That's okay though. You guys get to see me every day at least, because right now we have been uploading every single day, and I plan to probably do this a lot right now with all the information that's coming out on the Switch. I think I'm going to give my review on some Switch gameplays if y'all want to see that. But in today's video, I really want to talk about the Switch 2 performance, because stuff has come out to where people are debating, is this good or bad, especially with it happening this early. Like, what's the move with this? Is this a bad thing? So we're going to be talking about that today. If you guys haven't, I would appreciate if you guys could subscribe to the channel and like the video, as we are pushing hard videos out every day right now. So if you haven't seen those videos, I'd greatly appreciate it, and would appreciate the subscribe, as I'm trying so hard to do some crazy things with this YouTube channel. But let's get right into this video. So this video really came from the Cyberpunk 2077 news that has come out the last few hours, which are, I believe people have been playing the game and noticing things about the demo that they have showed off over there at the Nintendo Switch experience. And people are talking about the resolution, the frame rate, and all that stuff. And there's been some comments that have led people to be concerned about the power of the Nintendo Switch 2. Let's first get some good news out before we start the bad news when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077. It has been confirmed that the whole game, even the DLC, is going to be all on cartridge, on a 64GB cartridge. So that's pretty cool that they came out and said that. That's actually kind of an accomplishment right now with all the controversy surrounding game key cards and just the future of physical media right now. So it's cool to see CD Projekt Red come out with that news. So let's talk about the Cyberpunk Nintendo Switch demo. Now, it is at 1080p 30 frames per second docked. And a lot of people are kind of worried about the fact that it's not at a full 60 frames per second, which I really don't understand why people are complaining about this, because Cyberpunk already is such a demanding game on pretty much any platform that you're playing it on, that it's really hard to accomplish the 60 frames per second anyways. And it does appear that in handheld mode, it is going to actually be at 720p. Now, this is one I could understand why people are a little upset about, since the Switch 2 screen is 1080p, and I guess this kind of shows that sacrifices they're gonna have to make to be putting this game onto the Nintendo Switch, which is the portability factor, that it's going to be at 720p, which I guess if you look really in the past with the Switch 1 games, that's actually pretty good, because we've seen some crazy resolution changes with third-party games. I think even The Witcher 3 had a really crazy resolution in handheld mode when you played that onto the Nintendo Switch beforehand. And the performance mode of this game is only going to be running at 40 frames, and the wording makes it sound like they can't even confidently tell you that the performance mode of Cyberpunk 2077 on Nintendo Switch 2 will be at a locked 40, which again, I think people need to realize that Cyberpunk is a visually demanding game on pretty much any platform of choice. So the fact that it's here on Switch 2, I think, is a big accomplishment for both CD Projekt Red and Nintendo to have a game like that onto the Switch 2, especially at launch day. And something that the developers wanted to specifically say within the demo is that they are trying to make it actually run better. They're hoping to have a better performance closer to when the release date of the Switch 2 is here. Hi. So we're back here. This is future Max talking to past Max. But something had happened a few days after this recording. I filmed this a long time ago, or not really a long time ago, but other Switch 2 stuff came out, and that was kind of priority. But Cyberpunk, the build that was played at the Nintendo event on top of what was shown off at their presentation event, was only a 7-week build of the game. Meaning that Cyberpunk 2077, the Switch 2 port, was only worked on for 7 weeks from what was shown today. And that is an absolute achievement with what they accomplished in 7 weeks. I know initially I said that I didn't think it was possible that they could make anything really strongly better with this game. The fact that that's a 7-week build and we're like, what, 7 weeks away from the Switch 2? I think anything's possible at this point, and it kind of makes me wonder what the future of third-party games are going to look like. Because a lot of the times with Switch 1 ports, people were developing those things, at least like the solid good ones, they developed that for a solid year or two. So the fact that CD Projekt Red pulled this off in 7 weeks, I just mind-blowing and has me super excited for the future of third-party support. People can't be saying that this system has weak power when it can handle things like this in 7 weeks. The support for the Switch 2 is going to be crazy. From a power perspective, it looks like it's on par with a PS4 Pro and Xbox Series S. So people complaining about the power of the Switch 2 clearly don't know what they're talking about. Let's continue back to whatever past Max was saying about Cyberpunk and Hogwarts Legacy. My only thing with that is I don't think they're going to be able to get much better, considering we are less than 2 months away at this point for the Nintendo Switch 2. So I think what we're getting is kind of what we're getting. I mean, who knows? Maybe they could do some craziness. I mean, this company has done craziness. They managed to put Witcher 3 on the Switch 1. Everything on cartridge, that is a pretty crazy statement that they did, and I'm sure as we learn more about the Switch 2 hardware, these developers are going to be able to do things crazy with the system. I want to talk about something else with Cyberpunk's Switch 2 version that is kind of crazy that it's being able to do that not even the PS4 version of this game could do, which is getting the Lost Liberty DLC onto the Switch 2. Lost Liberty, I think, was planned for the PS4 version of Cyberpunk, but due to the power of the PlayStation 4, they had to scrap the DLC completely. And the fact that they're able to put it onto the Switch 2, I think really just goes to show of how powerful this system could be. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be as powerful as the PlayStation 5, because clearly it's not that. From what I've seen, the Switch 2 might be a little bit more powerful than a PlayStation 4 Pro. So I think the fact that it was able to get this onto the Switch 2 is really nice and really shows how great this system can be. Because people gotta remember, if they're complaining about the price tag right now of $450, you better be glad that Nintendo Switch chose the power that it has right now, because look at these other handhelds out there within the market. They're very high because of it's a more powerful system. It would have been a very expensive console if Nintendo even attempted to be as powerful as the PlayStation 5. But that's not stopping people from complaining about it. They always find something to complain about with the Switch 2. And the Switch 2 has its fair complaints to have, but I feel like performance is something that really should not be argued about right now. It is what it is. I'm hoping by the end of this video to change y'all's mind on the Switch 2's performance. Another thing that's been brought up with this whole visual performance strength of the console is with Hogwarts Legacy. They showed off Hogwarts Legacy on the Nintendo Switch 2 presentation, and it visually kind of looked a little rough compared to other versions out there. It still looked 20 times better than what it looks on Nintendo Switch though. Guys, look at the Switch 1 of Hogwarts Legacy. Now, that is probably one of the worst looking Switch 1 games out there. However, it is crazy that they were still able to put that onto the Switch. That should have never been able to happen. But the fact that they're putting it on the Switch 2 now with an upgraded version, when people were complaining about the visuals on it on Switch 1, I really don't understand why people are complaining about this, because obviously the Switch 2 is not as powerful of the PS5 and Xbox Series X, so you're not going to get Hogwarts Legacy looking like that. In fact, Hogwarts Legacy was always supposed to be like a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X game. It was never supposed to come to last-gen consoles. I think the only reason why it came to like PS4 and Xbox One is that the sell numbers were not doing as well, and they wanted to do more because I think people also couldn't get the system at the time. It was still hard to find a PS5 and Xbox Series X. So that's another reason why they brought it to the older gen consoles. So if people are complaining about the visuals, remember this is a game that really shouldn't even be on the platform in the first place, since it wasn't supposed to be on last gen. But people are talking about the visual performance and the frame rates of Hogwarts Legacy. It is having a 4K mode at a locked 30 frames per second. And in handheld mode, it's at 1080p. But I think what people are really upset about is the frame rate. which I'm hopeful that they're going to do some sort of performance mode of this game. We're seeing developers throw performance mode out there for Switch 2 as Cyberpunk has it. Looks like Nintendo is going to be putting it in some of their own first-party games. So I have a feeling that whenever Hogwarts Legacy comes, which I believe it's supposed to be a launch title, we could be getting an update of performance modes, which this is exactly what next-gen consoles have. So if we're getting these performance updates to where we can choose how the game runs and looks, I think is a super exciting feature to where you can lower some things that you don't care about to have a higher frame rate. I mean, I will say out of everything that we've seen from the Switch 2's power, I will say that I think visually Hogwarts Legacy does look pretty disappointing. I feel like this is a game that could look a little bit better with what they're doing. However, I also realize that this is a game that was not meant for last-gen consoles in the first place. And it still looks 100% miles better than Hogwarts Legacy on the Nintendo Switch 1. So I've kind of accepted that this is what we're gonna get, and we're probably going to see this every now and then with third-party games. That's what happened with the Switch 1. Some people were able to make incredible third-party ports, and then sometimes companies just did absolutely nothing. They were so lazy that they didn't do a great job of bringing that game over to the system. And I expect, with the fact that we're already seeing things like this with the Switch 2, we're going to see the same thing happen with the Switch 1, where some third-party games are going to look absolutely amazing to where other developers, they just were lazy and did not optimize the game how it could have been and didn't put in the right amount of time to putting that game onto the system, that system being the Switch 2. The way I see it is it just really reminds me of the Switch 1 and how developers were working on games for that system. I will say I am kind of surprised to see this already happening this early. I thought we would see something like this happen probably like 1 year later after the Switch 2, just because we're seeing developers still develop for last-gen consoles. And I would have thought that hardware-wise, it wouldn't have taken too much effort to really learn how to do the Switch 2. However, I feel like if developers learn this system, take the time, they're going to be able to do wonders with the system, such as putting Cyberpunk 2077 onto the Nintendo Switch 2. And I know people are complaining about power right now with this system, but you gotta remember, Nintendo has never been a person to care about power. In fact, they're always behind on anything. Like, this is the first time we're seeing 4K Nintendo games. 4K has been a thing since what, like 2015? Am I correct about that? And the Switch 1 didn't even have 4K. When they were talking about like an upgraded Switch, which ended up being like an OLED Switch, there was no 4K there. It's just performance, power, that's just not something that's really important to Nintendo. And I think a lot of people that buy this system are just really buying it for the first party games, as Nintendo has never had such the biggest presence when it comes to third party games. I think now that is going to change because Switch 1 had the biggest third party support, and as we go into a more stronger system, the Switch 2 is going to have more of that third party support. People are going to be on board with this system. There were so many developers that was still unsure if the Switch was going to be successful back in 2017, and developers came late into developing for the system, which is why we had so many like weird third-party games come at like halfway through the Switch 1 cycle. I think with the Switch 2, we have nothing to worry about with that. You just might get every now and then with a third-party game where it doesn't have visually or frame rate options that you were hoping it would have. However, I feel like with these performance modes, we'll be able to choose if we want a higher frame rate or a higher resolution, which I think is super exciting. That's one of my favorite things of next-gen consoles, having that feature. And first-party Nintendo games, I don't think is gonna have any issue with this, as we've already seen with Meteoroid Prime 4, is that we have an option to do 120 frames per second on the Switch 2 version, which is really nice. Granted, 720p, but 120 frames per second is really nice because a lot of the times games have that as an option, but a lot of people don't have the correct hardware to actually utilize 120 frames per second. And with that Switch 2 screen, it can handle 120 frames per second. So you can actually see that used in, it's gonna look amazing, man. The last thing I will say on this is I wouldn't be surprised within a few months we're gonna see something similar happen to Final Fantasy VII. There's probably going to be some sort of news coming out in a few months about that, on how it's going to run in resolution, and people are probably going to bring back the whole Nintendo Switch debate of its power, its performance, is this a good system, all that type of stuff. So expect this conversation every few months, I bet. This is probably going to be the new debate of the Switch 2 for the longest time, other than its pricing, of course. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Are you guys concerned about the Switch 2 power like everyone is saying online? I think this is going to be something that will, as we learn more about the hardware, as developers use this thing, I think they're going to learn how to make this happen and make it look good and give those options of quality, performance mode, that type of stuff, to where I would think it's going to help where people are not going to complain as much. I would hope, at least. For me, I'm not worried. I'm happy with what we're getting here. I wasn't expecting the Switch 2 to actually have options to where you can decide what you want to look better, frame rate rise, that type of stuff. So when that was shown off at the presentation, I was pretty surprised, and I'm glad to see third parties utilize that option. I would say the only thing that I'm surprised about is that we're seeing it happen before the Switch 2 even comes out. But at the same time, I wasn't 100% sure if Cyberpunk 2077 would come to the Switch. I just knew that Nintendo and these third-party developers probably wanted to make a statement with the system, and Cyberpunk would be the perfect game to make that statement with how powerful this system could be. So I would love to hear what you guys are thinking. Did I change your mind at all in this video? Or were you one of those people that was complaining, and then you're like, wait, Max makes some good points here. Maybe we don't have to worry as much here. I want to hear all that in the comments down below. Make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out the Twitter, check out the Instagram, become a Monado Marine in the description below. $5 a month helps out the channel tremendously, especially as we're doing all this stuff to go to the Nintendo Switch 2 launch day at New York. We're going to be there for over a week, filming videos, uploading every day of what's happening in the line. So if you guys want to consider doing that, all of this money is going towards that trip, so I greatly appreciate it. If not, it's all good. I have been talking for way too much. I mean, quite literally, my voice is still recovering from the 24-hour live stream that we did, but I think it's gotten better. You guys can let me know in the comments. I mean, I definitely still hear it, but I think it's better. And sometimes it sounds normal, sometimes it doesn't. It's one of those things, I guess. It'll get better by next week, I would think. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video. If y'all have any Switch 2 suggestions for like what I should do videos on, let me know. I have a lot of ideas right now, but I'm hoping to film a lot of videos at once at this time. So love to hear from y'all. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. What in the world happened to my voice? I'm out here saying that my voice is going back to normal, and then I had moments like that just happen.